If you've been following through on this sequence of tutorials, you'll see that I've added in some additional chapters here, and I've also completed these other items so that we've got a fairly full set of chapters that will allow us to deal with the table of contents and have a look at how that works. But in this tutorial, we're looking at images. So we'll come back to this chapter here, the first 12,000 miles. Now if we have a look at InDesign at this chapter, there it is there, you can see that the chapter has an illustration in it at the ship, the SS Fairsky. Now when I copied all of the text and inserted or pasted it into Sigil, we asked for plain text to be pasted in, which strips out the image. So what we get left with is a space where the image would be and the caption. We can have a look at how we insert an image into our EPUB file into this chapter and create this as a caption text style that will work with the image. So first of all, let's have a look at the code and see what is here from the paste. Code view. So here we can see that the space that our image was in InDesign has been created in Sigil as a blank paragraph. And just below that, there's a second paragraph with the caption in it. So first of all, let's place an image in this chapter. Go back to Book View, and we can do it from there. So I'm simply going to click in the text to indicate where I would like the image to appear. I'm going to come up here to the Insert File button, click it, and as explained in a previous tutorial, these are the images that are currently present in the ebook, and what we want to do is to introduce a new image from our computer. So we click here, Other Files. So I'm looking for an image called Fairsky, and I see it there, and it's already been pre-sized to be 520 by 275. That's the image size that seems to work with most ebook readers. If it was a very large image, then the image would probably extend beyond the confines of the screen, and you might only see a third of the image or a half of the image. So this seems to be a size that works well with most readers. So I'm simply going to select that and open it, and there we see it's inserted the image in its native size. Now my view on images is if you can size them to be correct before you insert them, then it makes it a lot easier and simpler than trying to set widths and heights for images in the code. So that would be my recommendation, to use this image size and to prepare your images in advance to be the correct size for the book. So first of all, let's have a look at the images folder, and you'll see here that that image has been inserted into the images folder. So the actual image resides in the images folder, and it's referenced in the document, which means you could insert that image in multiple locations in multiple chapters, and there would be one image and many references to it. So let's look in the code now and see what this shows us. You can see here that the image has been placed within a paragraph, which means that it's being treated as text. It's going to flow as text. Now the image tag is a little bit different to other tags in that there's no close. That's the image tag right there. So what we've got here is IMG, which indicates image, alt equals, and then the word Fairsky. Now alt is the text that describes the image. If you're familiar with website design, or if you've looked at images on websites and you hold your cursor over the image, sometimes a little pop-up will come up with the alt description. It's often used by Google and other search engines to identify images and provide some description of them. SRC stands for source, and the source is the path down to where the image resides in the images folder. So you can see you've got a capital I images, which is the name of our images folder, and then we've got a / fairsky.jpg, and that's the name of our image. So source describes the path to the image, the reference to it. And then that's our closing tag, as it were. That whole thing there, make sure that the image shows up in your text. Now that's held in a paragraph. You can also see our caption is held in a paragraph. Now what we'd like to do here is, if I just select that image, you can see that the caption is sitting down like a paragraph would. It has a space between the top of the paragraph text and the bottom of the image. Now I would like that caption to sit up snug with the image so that it's more associated with it rather than being its own independent paragraph. So visually it becomes obvious that that caption belongs to that image. Now as these are paragraphs and we're treating them as text, we can use a similar technique that we've used in other areas to snug up text together. Now there's several ways we can do this, and because this image is considered a paragraph and this caption text is considered a paragraph, we can use the same technique that we've used before to introduce a soft break. So I'm going to click just in front of SS Fairsky and backspace, and you'll see my text is moved up to be in line with this. And then hold the Shift key down once, press Enter, and you'll see that our text has snugged in directly underneath the image. Let's have a quick look at the code so we can see what's happened there. So now our image and our text has become contained within a single paragraph, and we have a break tag there which is creating the soft return. Now we also have a break tag here. This isn't required. It came as part of the paste when the image was pasted in as a paragraph. So I'm going to remove that. Let's look at our book view again, and you'll see that nothing's changed as a result of that move. Now there's something else that I would like to do to give this caption a little bit more identity, a little bit more space. So let's first of all go and have a look at the style file to see what's there. I've already got that open. And you can see here that there's a definition of style already created, p.caption. So P denotes paragraph, and the dot caption is a class. This class has a definition, a margin definition of 001EM0. So what we'll do first is let's go and apply that class to the particular paragraph that is our caption. Going back now to our chapter, into our code view. So I'll just click in the paragraph. Let's create a space so that we can put our class in. Type in class equals. And as in previous tutorials, we've now got some incomplete code, and Sigil is letting us know that. You notice here it says error on line 27. So if we come across here, we see that we have all of our lines are numbered. There's line 27, so it's correctly identifying where the error is in the code. So we'll finish that off now. Class equals, and I'll type in the name of the class, which is caption. Let's look back now at our book view and see if we can see what's changed. It may not be obvious, but we've introduced a slightly larger space underneath the caption, between the caption and the next paragraph. Slightly larger space than the normal paragraph spacing. And that's controlled by our CSS style. So I'll click in this first paragraph just below the caption to bring our preview up, so we can have a look at that. And let's now go and have a look at the CSS code and see what happens when we change the settings. So again, as in the previous tutorial, I explained that you can imagine that this line of text is contained within a box, and the margins are measurements from the edge of the box, the border of the box. So we have top margin, right margin, bottom margin, and left margin. And you see here in the margin definition we have top margin right margin, bottom margin, and left margin. So we've put a measurement in for the bottom margin. All of the others are set at 0. And it's 1 EM. Now what is an EM? An EM is a measurement similar to a pixel but different. A pixel is an absolute measurement. So when you set a measurement of 20 pixels, no matter what the device screen size is, 20 pixels will be the absolute measurement that's applied to the element, like a text or a picture. 1 EM is more of a proportion. And we'll look at this further in the CSS tutorial, but the basic idea is that 1 EM equals 12 points equals 16 pixels equals 100%. We'll come back and explain that in a little more detail in the CSS tutorial. So let's change 1 EM to 2 EM and see what happens. So if you watch the preview on the right hand side here, you can see the change. Now what happened there is that the space between the underside of our caption and the top of a following paragraph increased in size 2 times. Let's change that to 4 EM if you watch the preview on the right hand side. There we go. Oh, it's more obvious there. So now we've got a large space. So what we're doing is increasing the bottom margin so that there's a little bit more space between the caption and the paragraph than there would be between 2 paragraphs. I'll change that back to 1 EM. Let's go back to our chapter. And so now what we've got here is the image sitting in the text, the caption snugged up neatly below it, so it's very much associated with the image that it's a caption for, and a slightly bigger space between the bottom of the caption and the top of the following paragraph. Another place we have images in this particular ebook is in the other books section. So you can see here that this image sits across on the right hand side and is included or part of the text, whereas the previous image that we've looked at in our chapter here is a paragraph all on its own. So how have I managed to get that image to sit over on the right and be included in the text? Well, first of all, let's have a look at the code and see what that reveals to us. Code view. So here's our text here, and you can see our image tag right there. Now this image tag seems to be a lot longer. It's got a little more detail in it than the previous one. Let's have a look at that. We've got IMG, which indicates that this is an image tag. We have Alt, which provides a description of the image, and Sigil by default takes the image name. We've got a section here called Class, which we'll look at in a minute. And then we have Source, as we saw previously, which is the path through the Images folder and down to the name of the actual image itself. So our class is float right. Now let's have a look at what that is in the CSS file, in our style file. So in the style file there's a section on images, and there's various entries in here, but the one we're after is image float right. So IMG refers to image, and .float right is a class. Float right is a class name. One of the definitions or the settings that's here is float and then right. Now in Word and some other software, to move text or images around, you often click right align, left align, justify, sometimes align, depending on what the software is. In CSS and in our ebook, float is what we're looking for, and in this case we're floating to the right. We've also got some settings in here for margin. And as I explained in the previous tutorial, if you can imagine this image is contained within an invisible box, then the margin is the space beyond the border. Now the reason that I have some settings here is that I'd like some space between the text and the image, rather than the text being hard up against the image. So I'm going to make some changes to the measurements here, the pixel measurements in our margin definition. And if you watch the preview on the right hand side, you'll see the change. I'm going to increase the margin on the left hand side of our image to 15 pixels. Now you can see that the text moved away from the image. And scrolling down, that makes the space available for the image less, so it's likely that the paragraph will become taller. Let's test that and make this 25 pixels. So this space increased and more text was pushed down this way. I'll change that back to 10 pixels. So simply we have the definition for the image to float right, and for there to be a margin around the image to keep the text at a discrete and pleasant distance. And that's the whole class sitting right there. Now every image that has the class float right is controlled by this definition, these two items, float and margin. And we can see that when we look into the other books chapter and look at book view. So here's a second image. Let's have a look at the code for that. Code view. So here's our first image, just sitting up there with its class float right. And now our second image, there's its image tag there, and it has the same class float right. Now if I change that class name to float left, let's see what happens. So you can see that the image has moved over to the left hand side and the text wrap margins have applied. And the reason is that in the style file we also have a float left definition, a float left class. And by applying float left, you see that there's the float and we're asking for it to float to the left. And we have these margin settings. So we have the ability to move the image to the left or the right, and any image which has a class float left can be affected by these settings. And you see it clearly in the text. So let's change this image cover to be a proper cover and replace the placeholder image that's there. So simply going to click and drag a little bit, a few millimeters, and let go. I'm going to come up here to insert file, click it. I'm going to go and find a book image, a pre-prepared one. Here it is here. I have one that's already made to the correct size. I'll simply open that. It becomes replaced. Now interestingly enough, Sigil inserts it as a piece of text within the paragraph. So we'll just need to go and make a slight change to that to get that to float right and work correctly as we would like. So let's go into the code, find our image tag, there it is there. So img is the image tag, alt, Sigil has already inserted in the description the title of that particular image. The source is there, but what we're missing is the class. So let's just pop the class in there. Class equal quotes, and then we'll give the class name, which is float right. And you see on the preview, it's done exactly that. It's immediately taken on the definition from the style file of the float right class. We see that in our book view, and then we have the beginnings of the description of this particular book, which is dealers buying, selling, and making money. And then you can copy and paste your description in. And in a previous tutorial, we looked at how you change that website link. We did that in the code. So a simple way of doing that is to select the link, come up here to Sigil and click the link button, and it offers you your target. Now previously we looked at adding an anchor link into a document, which is the internal linking system, when we use the target here. So if I put in my website name, StephenOutram.com, OK, then you don't see any change there at the moment, but if we look into the code, the href is http StephenOutram.com. So I can go back to book view and just manually change this. I'm just going to use the arrow keys to get into the piece of text I want and change this to Stephen Outram. So you'll find reference to that in an earlier tutorial. This has been a tutorial on inserting images within documents and manipulating them using the style file and CSS coding.